Well, welcome back to the Steve Maggs Muscle Car Show podcast, and this is episode number 47. And I'm holding a 1957 or 56 Plymouth Belvedere, a little 125th scale Johan Promo from 1956. And you got to wonder if this thing could talk. Maybe little Johnny said, "Come on, Mom, Dad, buy a Plymouth. Don't buy that Chevy or Ford. Buy a Plymouth." So you got to wonder what the story would be on this thing. But as you all know, of course, this show is about me reading from my 2013 book, Steve Magnanti's 1001 Muscle Car Facts, which came out on Car Tech Books. And of course, we've already been through the General Motors section and the Ford section as well. So we're right now into the Plymouth part of the book. 100 Facts on Plymouth. There will also be Dodge and Chrysler. In fact, on this episode, which is episode 47, we will be transitioning from Plymouth into Dodge. It's all in the family. It's all Chrysler. But of course, I do want to thank our sponsors, OCTAIN Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. OCTAIN Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. You can give them a call at 508-859-4515. Okay, we'll begin now. And again, this is the number crunching and press commentary sub part of the Plymouth chapter. So let's begin with fact number 685. The 1967 through 69 second generation Barracuda stands apart from competing Camaro, Firebird, Cougar, and Javelin pony cars due to the availability of three body styles. Emulating Mustang's three-body strategy, the mid-series Barracuda was offered in fastback, BH29 VIN code, convertible, BH27 VIN code, and hardtop, BH23 configurations. Though the fastback was the most popular, attracting 70,473 buyers, of them 30,110 in 1967, 22,575 in 1968, and just 17,788 in 1969, the practical hardtop wasn't that far behind, selling 60,950 units, just about 10,000 units less than the fastback. And of those, 28,196 sold in 67, 19,997 sold in 1968, and 12,757 sold in 1969. Not surprisingly, the third body style, the convertible, had the lightest sales volume at 8,510 cars in all 3 years. Of them, 4,228 sold in 1967, 2,840 sold in 1968, and just 1,442 sold in 1969. So yeah, that's the tale of the second generation Barracuda. By contrast, the first gen Barracuda of 1964 through 66 was one body style only, that big crazy fastback with that massive glass window. Of course, we get into the third generation Barracudas of 70 through 74, and those were only two bodies. Of course, the coupe and convertible. The fastback was eliminated, but you got to wonder what could have been. Okay, let's move on with Roadrunner goodies with fact 686. The 1968 Roadrunner was predicted to sell 2,500 units, maybe 3,000 tops. But the quirky beeper really caught on, and first-year sales totaled 44,599. Only the Pontiac GTO and Chevelle SS396 muscle offerings outsold it that year. Subsequent model years sales were as follows: 1969, 84,420. 1970, 43,404, which includes 1,920 Superbird wing cars. 1971, 13,665. 1972, 7,628. 1973, 19,056. 1974, 11,555. 1975, 7,183. 1976, which of course would be the Volare F-body, 7,350, about the same as 75. Interesting. 1977, that is. There were 4,585 Roadrunners. 1978, unknown. probably around 2,500. Records weren't kept. 1979, 1,122 Roadrunners, and finally in 1980, just 496 Roadrunners were made. But keep in mind, of course, as we get into the 1974 up era, muscle cars were pretty much a dirty word and a thing of the past, and certainly 1976 through 80, the Volare Roadrunner was a minority vehicle, barely seen, although very popular. I love them in Spitfire Orange. Make mine a 360. Keep in mind, though, the 360 was only available with an automatic. You know, if you wanted a 4-speed Roadrunner, you were looking at a 318 two-barrel car in the 76 through 80 period. And yeah, it's horrible to think this, but in 79 and 80, you could get a slant 6 in a Roadrunner. It was possible. Depressing, but true. But the crazy thing is, from the beginning to the end, they all had the beep beep horn. Kind of cool. Okay, let's move on to fact 687. This is F-car stuff, Volare and Aspen. Aside from a handful of external nameplates and a specific grille insert, it's impossible to tell a Plymouth Volare from a Dodge Aspen unless you look at the VIN, vehicle identification number. Volare VINs begin with the letter H, while Dodge Aspens begin with the letter N. Likewise, telling a 76 Volare or Dodge Aspen from a 77 is virtually impossible because nothing was changed. The only surefire method is to check the 6th character of the VIN, 6 in 1976, 7 in 1977. Yeah, the Volare and Aspen were groundbreaking vehicles, really, in their time. They essentially were meant to replace the A-body Dodge Dart and Plymouth Signet and Duster. And they were worthy cars. You know, they were pretty much advanced. They had leaf springs in the back. They had transverse torsion bars up front, kind of like, imagine 2 hockey sticks under the radiator, one left, one right, and that's how the front tires had their suspension. But one thing that's really sad about the F cars is the fact that the gas tank was set to one side. I believe it was the driver's side. So running dual exhaust from the factory was not feasible. They all had single exhaust from the factory. Kind of a weird thing. So that tells you that when the designers laid out the floor pan architecture of those things, there was no consideration given to a high-performance version with dual exhaust. Crazy but true. That said, there were some high-flow single exhaust systems fitted to the E58 364-barrel cars, which were referenced earlier on this show in other episodes. So listen back to the Plymouth stuff, and you'll hear me talk about the high-flow single exhaust systems on big 360 Roadrunners. Okay, let's move on to more Volare Aspen stuff and a little reference to King Richard Petty. Fact number 688. Option code A43 resonated strongly with NASCAR fans due to the fact that 43 was Richard Petty's racing number for many successful years. As such, it was chosen by Chrysler to designate the 1978 Plymouth Volare Dodge Aspen street kit car program in 1978. Unfortunately, that same year, Petty began his shift from Chrysler products to GM offerings, somewhat deflating the impact. Though the King began the season in a Dodge Magnum, the winner's circle was elusive. Despite 7 top 5 finishers in 17 races, Petty switched to a Chevy Monte Carlo. None of this helped Volare street kit car sales, which only reached 247 units. Dodge dealers had an even tougher time, as only 145 Aspen street kit cars found buyers. Now, we don't want to confuse the Super Coupe Volare and Aspen with the street kit car. The Super Coupes were made in larger numbers, and of course the Super Coupes also had those add-on fender flares and 15 by 8-inch wheels, and in some cases the number 43 on the door, that kind of thing. But the street kit car was something an evolution of the Super Coupe. They actually had hood pins, which, believe it or not, were fake. No joke. The hood pins were actually part of the hood. When you lifted the hood, the cable, the pin, all that stuff came up with the hood. They weren't functional, which kind of tells you a lot about those days. But the street kit cars also had a trunk spoiler and even exposed little rivet bolt things on the wheel arch appliques. Now, I got to say that the most recent use of add-on body kit stuff in Mopar land is the Dodge Challenger Demon and wide body Challenger, which, yeah, those are plastic add-ons, and they're there for a very, very useful reason. Those cars, or at least the original Demons, came with 4 Nitto drag slicks at all four corners, which is an amazing thing. A car has DOT drag slicks from the factory, but yeah, the 9-second Demon had them. But in order to cover those tires, the DOT mandated some sort of bodywork. So yes, the wide body kit came back. But again, it was first seen on the A43 cars in 1978 and the Super Coupes. Good looking stuff, but again, it's an add-on. But again, an effective one at that. Okay, more Roadrunner stuff with fact 689. This is a quote. Just what is there about Plymouth's Roadrunner okay, let's start this from the top. Okay, fact 689 minus the tongue twist. Quote, just what is there about Plymouth's Roadrunner that influenced us to choose it over the other 5 finalists? First of all, the original concept of the Roadrunner was one of combining a low-priced two-door sedan body with a stout but docile running engine. Add on a firm suspension and good brakes, throw in some simple ornamentation, a silly bird emblem, a beep-beep horn, and you have a reasonably priced automobile that performs like something that usually costs half again as much. The basic concept of simplicity and low price is what makes it a winner, end quote. Thus wrote the editors of Motor Trend magazine in a February 1969 issue as they awarded the prestigious Car of the Year award to the second-year Roadrunner of 1969. About that pricing, the suggested retail figure for a 1969 RM21 Pillar Coupe was $3,077, which included the 335 horsepower 383, F70 by 14 tires, heavy-duty suspension, 11-inch drum brakes, dual exhaust, and a Hearst shifted A833 4-speed manual transmission. By contrast, a base-level 1969 Pontiac GTO started at $3,293, almost $300 more, but stuck buyers with a Ford-supplied 3-speed manual transmission. 4-speed buyers shelled out an extra $184.80. The GTO's $3,477.80 price tag being $400.80 higher than an otherwise similar Roadrunner. So you got to say, you think about that. That's about a 10% difference in price. So the beauty of the Roadrunner is you got a standard 4-speed transmission, whereas over at GM, in fact, even the SS396. Chevelle came with a 3-speed manual. Not a lot were built, and of course the ones that were, mostly were swapped over to Muncie 4-speeds in the years since, but every Roadrunner came with a 4-speed transmission. Now that did change in 1970 when the A230 3-speed manual became standard on Roadrunner and Super B. But that was done for a couple of reasons, primarily to get around the insurance surcharge that came with any 4-speed muscle car. By going with a 3-speed manual, they got away from that. So that was kind of part of the strategy, and yeah, they were a little bit cheaper too. Okay, let's move on to fact 690. But before we do that, let's thank our sponsors at High Octane Classics, the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. High Octane Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Give them a call at 508-859-4515. Okay, back to the show with fact 690. The bait and switch routine is as old as the auto industry. So how much of an ultimate performance value was the 1969 Roadrunner versus its primary opponent, the Pontiac GTO? Top engine options included the Plymouth E74 426 Street Hemi, 425 horsepower, 490 foot-pounds of torque for $813.45. Over at Pontiac, the L67 Ram Air 4 400 gave you 370 horsepower and 445 foot-pounds for $558.20. Top transmission offerings included the Plymouth 18-spline iron case Hemi 4-speed, which was included with the Hemi engine option, and Pontiac, the RPO 358 M21 close ratio aluminum case 4-speed, included with the Ram Air 4 option. Top rear axle options were the Plymouth A34 Super Track Pack 410-1 Dana 60 for $102.15. At Pontiac, the Safe T-Track differential with 430 gears and a 10-bolt sold for $63.19. And that came with a heavy-duty 4-pinion in the Safety Track differential. And RPO 362 433 added added 433 ratio for $2.11. Amazing, cheap. So a Ram Air 4 GTO coupe with a killer 433 to 1 gear and a close ratio stick Ram Air sold for $4,101.13, $4,000 and change. A top tier Hemi Roadrunner pillar coupe sold for $3,000. What was that? That was a loud sound. Anyway, we'll keep going. Okay, let's just rewind that last sentence there. Okay, we're comparing the Ram Air 4 GTO and the Hemi Roadrunner. Is all well, Chris?
Yeah.
We're still rolling? Good. Okay. Must be a UFO passing overhead. All right. So a Ram Air 4 GTO coupe with a killer 433 ratio and a close ratio stick sold for $4,101.13. By contrast, an equally hot top-tier Hemi Roadrunner pillar coupe sold for $3,992, a mere $108.53 less. So I don't know. You ask me, what would you rather have, the Ram Air Goat or the Hemi Roadrunner? Still, a lot of folks would suggest either one for very strong reasons. Make mine the Hemi, but that's just me. Okay, let's move on. More Hemi Roadrunner info with fact 691. Today, Hemi Roadrunners and Ram Air 4 GTOs have equally rabid followings. Interestingly, a similar number of buyers turned out for these relatively exotic machines in 1969. Pontiac sold 759 Ram Air 4 Goats versus 788 Hemi Roadrunners, and that considers all body styles and transmission types combined. Bait and switch was in full play at both dealerships as salesmen steered the majority of shoppers toward less problematic 383 Roadrunners and non-Ram Air 400 GTOs, either of which was capable of impressive performance, but without the hassles associated with adjustable valve lash, high compression, and exotic induction. Yeah, it's interesting that, under 800 of both Ram Air 4 GTOs and Hemi Roadrunners sold in 1969. And it is a fact that, for every 383 Roadrunner or 400 GTO, just garden variety cars, people say, wow, that thing had a Hemi in it. But the reality is, maybe 1 in 100 was the real deal. But that said, the basic garden variety GTOs and Roadrunners were 14-second cars with the right driver with some slicks on them. So they were pretty quick in their own right. Okay, let's move on with some pony car data with fact 692. This is a quote. When you place the Mustang and Barracuda side by side, you immediately see that the Barracuda is more finely detailed automobile. The paint, body panel fit, and overall workmanship of the Barracuda is far superior to that of the Mustang. You can squeeze 5 in the Barracuda, while the Mustang is a genuine 2 plus 2, as long as the second 2 are children. End quote. Clearly, Speed and Custom magazine writer Marty Shore was impressed by the Barracuda he tested in the April 1965 issue. One big difference between these two pioneering pony cars is the fact that no Mustang was ever assigned a 1964 VIN. The Ford model year designation appears in the first place of the VIN. They're all coded as 1965 vehicles, even though production of the Mustang started in March of 1964. By contrast, Barracudas built in 1964 are assigned the number 4 in the third spot of the VIN to designate the 1964 model year. Barracuda production began in May of 1964, and 23,443 were built that year. Although this is a Plymouth chapter in my book, I also cover this fact in the Mustang and Ford chapter, as well as in my Steve Mignonti's 1001 Mustang Facts book. But a lot of folks talk about their 64 and a half Mustangs, and while it is absolutely true that Mustangs were built, thousands and thousands of them, in the 1964 calendar year, in fact, very early in the 64 calendar year, you got to remember that Ford never had a 4 in the VIN of a Mustang. It was always a 5. So did they have a time machine? Maybe. All right, let's move on to fact 693. 114, let's start from the top. Okay, 693, 14.4 square feet. That's the surface area of the 1964 through 66 Barracuda's curved glass back window, which at the time of its introduction was the largest one-piece glass panel ever fitted to a regular production vehicle made in the United States. It is ironic that one of history's best-known Barracudas, the Hearst Hemi under glass wheel-standing exhibition racer, employed a plexiglass replica of the iconic fishbowl, formed by clamping a sheet of the clear material between two stock Barracuda windows, then warming with heat lamps. The replacement unit weighed about 1/5 as much and was easily removed for engine service. Yeah, that's such a cool thing. There are magazine ads from 1965 from Hearst describing the idea behind the Hearst Hemi under glass, which Hearst used for advertising purposes to the ultimate extent. But they said, let's stick a Hemi in the rear and run like hell. That was the magazine ad. But it is true, in order to see the Hemi, it was perfectly placed underneath that big window. But keep in mind, you can only imagine the heat and vibration and maybe the damage to a large glass structure like that if the Hemi was actually underneath it. And keep in mind, the original Hearst Hemi under glass used two Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetors and eventually ran to a Hilborn 8-stack injector. So, the Hilborn sometimes would backfire, and when they do that, they tend to spit out a ball of soot, and the inside of that plastic or glass rear window probably had some fogging on it while they were tuning and running around in the pits. But anyway, it is cool that the Hemi Barracuda, Hemi under glass, that is, Barracuda, had a plastic version of that big rear window. Okay, 693 is done. Let's move on to fact 694, more Hemi goodies. The 426 Hemi has many nicknames, perhaps the most common being Elephant, a reference to its external dimensions. So what about the name King Kong? It appeared throughout the Hemi's 8-year production run of 1964 through 71 and, after much research, seems to have been coined by Car and Driver magazine technical editor Jan Norby in the May 1964 issue. Used as a headline for a story entitled King Kong Rides Again, Norby's piece playfully breaks news of the Hemi's dominance of the 1964 NASCAR Daytona 500 race. Quote, a casual observer at Daytona last February might have been puzzled by the sight of several Ford engineers nervously hiding their heads and hands under the hoods while whispering mysteriously to each other about a character named King Kong. To the initiated, there was no mystery. King Kong is a nickname for the Chrysler V8 used in the Plymouth Super Commando stock cars that ran away from the Fords at Daytona and established 4 new records in the process. End quote. Yeah, that's pretty cool. King Kong, basically hanging off the top of the Empire State Building, throwing Mustangs and 427s down to their doom and destruction. And it is true that when the 426 Hemi arrived on the scene, heads spun, literally, wedge heads spun, and suddenly the hemispherical combustion chamber was the design to have. And we all know, of course, that Ford countered very quickly with their 90-day wonder, the 427 single overhead cam, which had hemispherical combustion chambers. And when they tried it again in 1969, the Boss 429 was also somewhat of a hemispherical combustion chamber. So Hemi heads, whether they're in a Plymouth or a Ford or an airplane, are definitely pretty much the way to go in terms of maximum airflow in any kind of an engine. And Chrysler just happens to be the ones who utilize that trick to the utmost, including today. Every single Hemi Challenger, Charger, 300, pickup trucks, SUVs, those Hemis are absolutely real Hemis. Take a peek sometime. They're not fake. Okay, it's moving on to fact 695. Quote, snapshot sales of the Road Bird through model year 1971 were 4,236, constituting a drop of 64% over the previous year's figure of 11,831 for the same 2-month period. That's not just an annual adjustment in the market, it's more of a terminal illness. While some of the sales loss should be written off to changing times in the youthful buyer, while some of the sales loss should be written off to changing tastes in the youthful buyer as well as the youthful thinking buyer, the bulk of the loss will have to be laid directly on the high cost of insurance. Jim Brokaw, Motor Trend magazine associate editor, included those words in a February 1971 comparison test between 383 and 440 six-pack Roadrunners. Yeah, imagine that, 64% drop in 2 months of production between 70 and 71. It wasn't a joke. In fact, in many cases, people were paying as much money for their insurance as they were paying monthly for their muscle car. So that must have snipped a lot of people's ability to buy muscle cars. And of course, especially if you were under 21 or so, you also had to pay a surcharge. And of course, add in the 4-speed transmission factor. And, the fates conspired against muscle cars in the early 70s. But the amazing thing is today, in 2021, I guess, I don't know what it is. I think what it is the people buying muscle cars today are not 18 to 28. They're 48 to 78, you know what I mean? It seems to me that the older folks today are less of an insurance risk. But if you ask me, I mean, in the 60s for the first time ever, when young people were given access to 3 and 4 and 500 horsepower road cars, and that's naturally going to cause a spike in accidents. So I think it was basically a reaction to that first spike in data that caused the insurance industry to freak out as they did in the early 70s. But now, most people buying these cars are a little bit older and probably don't use them nearly as much in terms of traffic and having accidents. So I think that's why we're getting away with it now. And the insurance industry in the last 20 years still has not cracked down. So it's a difference in time and the kind of people buying these cars, I think, that allows today's muscle cars to prosper. Okay, here's our final fact for show 47. And it's more Roadrunner stuff from Motor Trend. Okay, fact 696. Jim Brokaw's 1971 Motor Trend Roadrunner story explored the emerging supercar insurance nightmare and described how most insurance providers calculated rates based on the weight to horsepower ratio. He noted that 30% surcharges were commonly applied for ratios under 10.5 to 1, regardless of the insurance applicant's driving record. The 383 Roadrunner's 3,857-pound shipping weight and 300 gross horsepower earned a surcharge-free 12.86 to 1 ratio, while the 440 six-packs, 4,050-pound curb weight and 385 net horsepower or gross horsepower came in at 10.09 to 1, triggering a hefty surcharge. This helps explain why Plymouth sold 11,682 Roadrunners with 383 power, but only 246 with the 446 pack, and an even slimmer 55 with the 426 Street Hemi. So yeah, that's pretty good how Jim Brokaw's article in 1971 really put numbers to the reality that the engine under the hood of the muscle car, not just the muscle car, was the major determining factor on how much you paid for insurance back in the day. Okay, well, that wraps it up for this episode, which is number 47 of the Steve Baggs Muscle Car Show podcast. We'll be back in a little while with episode number 48, in which we'll actually transition from Plymouth into Dodge. But along the way, we want to thank our sponsors at OCTAIN Classics, which is the Northeast's largest muscle car and supercar dealership, located at 143 Washington Street in Auburn, Massachusetts. OCTAIN Classics buys and sells and services muscle cars and exotics. Give them a call at 508-859-4515. Dan Marinelli and the guys over there will be thankful to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Steve Magnanti and Hasta Magnanti.